Okay, we are live. This is 1/28/2026, which would make this the anniversary of the Challenger explosion. Very memorable PSYOP. A lot of interesting leads on that one. A lot of reasons to not believe, although many will. I was debating somebody on the subject of the space program, and I suggested that the whole thing is science fiction, movie magic, and that it serves a function in worldview more than actual science and space travel. And the person I was debating about this cried. So I'm like, okay, I got to be careful. Sensitive subject. But we talked about it yesterday because of a plane crash, and the plane was called the Challenger. And so it's a couple of days from the 40th anniversary. It seems suggestive. All right, hello, chat. If you speak up, you will get a wrench. I want to go through the Discord server tonight. I've been meaning to do this, to comb through the server, even if it's a pre-recorded video, and catch everyone up. What's up? Pete Trippa says, can't wait. Oh, can't stay for long. I want to pop on and see what the news of the day is. You know, we're not always on the same page as everyone else as far as what the news of the day is, because we're taking time to examine these things, but we tend to mention the stuff that's going on. And I do stay up with topical things like the new song by Bruce Springsteen called The People of Minnesota. So let me start with this. So the title of tonight's live stream, Victory of the Hive, that's a reference to the blog post, which I just linked, Metascript, Victory of the People. So we were talking about repeated themes and names that were showing up in media leading up to the escalations in the Twin Cities. So here's from my blog. I noticed that Renee Nicole Good was in the news following Nick Shirley, Nicolas Maduro in his Nike sweatsuit, and the news around Nick Reiner. Now I have to update this blog, so I was going to put some notes there about the significance of Nick Shirley being in Minnesota as it relates to this, but I'll update that tonight. So if you're wondering why I had some gibberish there, it's a placeholder. So anyway, we were talking about Nick Reiner, and then we see Nicolas Maduro, and he's wearing Nikes, and it causes Nike sweatsuits to go viral. And I thought, isn't Nike the goddess of victory? And it means victory. And then you got Nicholas, victory, Nick Reiner, Nick Shirley. So what's going on here? And of course, Renee Nicole Good. And we already talked about the significance of her last name Good as it relates to the second part of Wicked, for good, and the underlying theme of Wicked 1 and 2, which has to do with essentially anti-ICE. It's an Antifa versus Trump as Wizard of Oz. That's the framing. With the animals that can talk representing the immigrants being kicked out of Oz. Oz is America, a fake dream world where the wizard's not even a real wizard. So then I see this thing with Alex Preddy. And I noticed behind him on the window was the word Nicolette, the name Nicolette. That's the street name, apparently. So I'm like, okay, well, Nicolette is a French origin derived from Nicole, and ultimately rooted in Greek Nicholas, meaning victory of the people. So then we have, again, victory of the people. And this was behind Alex Preddy, another 37-year-old liberal left white activist killed by ICE, which again is very consistent with the messaging in the Wicked movie, which is about the power the Good Witch has to actually affect change, whereas the marginalized witch who's been branded wicked doesn't have the position. And then we have memorial for Alex Preddy continues to grow at 26th and Nicolette. And then Bruce Springsteen comes out with a new song called Streets of Minneapolis, and the opening lyrics: through the winter's ice and cold, down Nicolette Avenue, a city aflame fought fire and ice. So this is what we would describe as concerted messaging. And the script the metascript, the overlapping continuity of fake events, communicates themes with names, colors, and numbers. And this is just empirical research. It's not my opinion. I'm looking at the main imagery that's posted at every single one of these events, and we do find consistent messaging. I'm going to go through your comments. Nicotrama says, we need to bet big on the Super Bowl. Seattle destroys the Patriots, right? Garrett, I think it might be a bad bet because the Patriots flying Elvis logo, but I think it's foreshadowing 6/11. Okay, now, if we look at Seattle Seahawks as representing the sea attack, and so if you remember what he said about 9/11 and the significance of 33-year-old Muhammad Atta, Muhammad attacks New York. Well, he's broken down the name Seattle to sea Atta, as in sea attack, where 9/11 came from the air. This one presumably is the water. And this is very consistent with the imagery that he's associated with the destruction of Seattle, specifically the beast of the sea references, as it relates to Elvis and the Kraken concept. And then with Neptune moving to where it has, into Aries, which apparently aligns us with a similar arrangement right before the Civil War, it kind of makes sense that Poseidon would be in play because Neptune, Poseidon, well, Poseidon is Russia's nuclear submarine, the unmanned one that could take out a coastal city and create radioactive tsunamis. Just like in the movie Paradise, radioactive tsunamis, bunkers. So from that perspective, the Patriots being US and the Seattle Seahawks representing the sea attack, and then Seattle, of course, is sort of ground zero for Antifa. So it does seem like it would make sense as far as the script goes. And I seem to recall Gematria Sports Better. What was the channel's name? The guy, his name's not Green. What's the name of the Gematria guy who does the sports? Because he was talking about the significance of New York Jets and having them defeated by the Patriots after 9/11. Like interesting little parallel stories in the sports. Yeah, Zachary Hubbard. I wonder if he's related to Al Ron. All right, let's see who else is here. 5-star QB10 says, wondering if there's going to be a live today, and boom. Yeah, I'll be sending out notifications like an hour prior if I have time. Flozik, Jamarian May says, don't forget about the other reporter on the ground, Nick Sortor. Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to. So we talked about the significance of Nicholas being repeated. And this has been going on for months. And the significance of Nick Shirley has to do with his agitation out there having to do with immigration in the Twin Cities. And so, yeah, I'm looking to see what other examples there are, because there's sort of a parallel here, as we've seen with green and the consistent meaning of it as a symbol and how it's been positioned in these various scenarios, like Green Day opening the Super Bowl. So, yeah, Nick Sorter, I'll have to look. Okay, so with Nick Shirley. And someone posted something in Discord a few minutes ago. Let me pull that up. American OF influencer Nicole Pardo, who was kidnapped by her Cybertruck after masked men pulled up beside her at gunpoint, has been found alive thanks to the Trump administration working with Mexican authorities. Okay, another Nicole Pardo. I don't know who that is. Interesting. Nicki Minaj, says Lean Dion. Right. Donald Trump's #1 fan. It's no longer Ye. Ye's been phased out. He apologized. He got hit on the head or something. He's out. But Nicki Minaj is now the #1 fan. And didn't she just dye her hair blonde? Or put on a blonde wig? Kind of like Ye had his hair dyed blonde. Gold. But yeah, what's being signaled here? Now, there's something else that was posted I thought was interesting. It had to do with, here it is. Lean Dion posted it. Giancarlo Esposito says, quote, it's time for revolution in America. as Trump's White House fuels a feeling of civil war in the streets. With the action of ICE agents in Minneapolis, quote, "We have to stand up to it. They can't take us all down. If the whole world showed up on Putin," so let me read this whole quote. It's from Variety. So this is a good one. I'm glad this came up, because we were talking about the common denominators with the predictive programming counterparts to the various world stage actors.
You know, some very rich old white men are exerting their power to suppress.
Okay, rich old white men, obviously we can see the meaning of that. Very much in a Marxist framework. So now the significance here is that this actor plays the antagonist of the Trump character in movies where the Trump character gets assassinated or nearly gets assassinated. So for example, in Megalopolis, Caesar Catalina is essentially Trump, and the mayor, played by this actor, is the one who orchestrates the assassination attempt, where he gets shot and he survives, and it's a miracle. He also is the antagonist Sidewinder to the president, played by Harrison Ford in Civil War, in this Marvel Comics Brave New World, Captain America Brave New World. But my point of it is, in that one, he's the opposer to the guy who was playing, well, Harrison Ford, who was playing essentially a Trump character, in the sense that he was at the podium and he gets shot at and he has to duck below the podium. And that was the trailer that aired the day before Butler, and Marvel Comics changed the trailer because it so eerily predicted what was about to happen. Same thing with The Boys. Season 4, the season finale, Assassination Run, they retitled it because of the proximity to Trump. And in The Boys, the antagonist to the Homelander, who's based on Trump, is played by the same actor. In that one, he's called Edgar. He's the CEO of Vought or something like that. So again, same actor in opposition to the Trump character in multiple movies. And in all of these movies, assassination is the theme. So it is significant that he's here talking about for a revolution against Trump. I have a whole blog post or a mind map showing the different movies where he has opposed the Trump character. And this might even go back to the favorite movie of the Obamas, Do the Right Thing. It's a pattern that goes back, a common theme, a subtext that follows this particular actor throughout many films. I would also argue that he represents President Obama in that sense as well. The Obama-Trump thing, because Trump got onto the political scene at the tail end of the Tea Party by latching on to the idea that President Barack Obama was actually not an American, had a Kenyan birth certificate. And so he was part of the birther movement. And they've had this back and forth antagonism since. And in the White House, there was a portrait of Barack Obama that Trump had replaced with a portrait of himself with his fist raised, yelling, "Fight, fight, fight." The implication between the lines being that, who set up the assassination attempt. So again, there's been this kind of antagonism between the two. And I would suggest that Trump represents 1776, whereas Obama represents 1619. These two different views of the origin of and meaning of what America is, what the American dream is. And it's very much in line with the Wizard of Oz being opposed by the witch, and the idea that he's a fascist and he's deporting the talking animals. But yeah, good call on Nicki Minaj there. Duet says, one of the witnesses to the Alex Pretty event was called Nilson, Nicholas's son. Yeah, post a link in Discord. I want to gather these up together and put them into a spreadsheet, a mind map. Yeah, so there is a new Poseidon movie coming out soon called, according to Jamarian May. Well, there's certainly, and this is highly significant, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. And the reason why that's significant is that Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan are both associated with the nuke. And then, of course, in the Odyssey, it's Poseidon is the enemy of Odysseus. Based on recent buzz, there are rumors about a new Poseidon movie with, okay, it's speculative. I see a trailer here. Keanu Reeves, Johnny Depp, but it's a fan-made concept trailer. Dwayne Johnson faces the wrath of the ocean, Poseidon. I don't know. I'll have to look into this. I'll wait for the IMDb. Because people are making these concept trailers and they're getting confused. But we definitely do have the main metascriptors of the nuke next to James Cameron. You know, I was looking at James Cameron's Terminator 2, and even scientists were very much praising James Cameron's depiction of a nuclear detonation. But for the Nolans to be working on this type of a project for the Odyssey, highly significant. And of course, Poseidon is the unmanned nuclear submarine that can send a radioactive tsunami to take out a coastal city. Going through your comments. Poultrygeist Populist says, if Trump goes down, the pickup truck army will lose their mind. Okay, so one of the things I pointed out is that in many examples we can show of Trump characters in movies, and this goes back, you know, Biff Tannen, Trackdown, End of the World episode from 1958, King Koopa, played by Dennis Hopper, Super Mario Brothers. Gremlins 2 has a Trump character. Machete, another big one. Back to the Future, Biff Tannen is huge. But anyway, in all of these, well, there's these connections either to 9/11 or to an assassination attempt that he survives. And that's been the pattern where in all the foreshadowing, he survives. With the exception of the recent movie Civil War that came out, just a couple of years ago, which is pertinent at this time. In fact, okay, in Civil War, the character who's obviously Trump is taken out, but they specifically have a black female soldier take him out. And I thought that's kind of interesting because they wanted that symbolism. They wanted this demographic, so black woman, rich white fascist. And so there's this kind of something that I noticed also in The Wizard of Oz, where the Wizard of Oz is being called out by the witch. And again, if you look at the demographics, you look at the backgrounds of these characters, it seems like, okay, this one represents the left, marginalized people of color, and then this is the fascist white rich guy in the capitalist system where everything is fake and even the gold bricks turn out to be fake. And meanwhile he's deporting the talking animals and taking away their right to speak. So my point is, in each of these you have the bad villain they created, and he's being confronted by someone who's on the polar opposite side of the political horseshoe. It's all symbolism. But anyway, yes, in Civil War, which is probably an indicator of what's to come, it's about the media, from the media's perspective, and they're covering the Civil War, and most people don't even care, or they're not even aware it's going on, which is kind of funny because that's probably how it would be. And the way they portrayed the right wing is very much the way that a lot of the ICE guys are being depicted. So there's sort of these mercenary types. Jamurian says, Nintendo just released a trailer for a new Super Mario animated film featuring the Yoshi character. Not sure the plot. Well, there should be something significant to it, given Luigi's, I think, Luigi, the video game character, his relevance on the world stage as of late. Because when Luigi Mangione came out, there was an overlap. Luigi Mangione uses a ghost gun to kill a CEO. Meanwhile, Luigi's Mansion, the game, comes out, and it's a haunted mansion, and he's got a ghost gun. So we already noticed this overlap with the name and the theme. Of course, Luigi versus the CEO was something that we actually saw repeated in a couple of ways. First, You had a Green Beret who blew up a Cybertruck in front of Trump Tower, which again targets Musk and Trump symbolically. This guy going after the fascist CEOs. But then previously, Musk was on Saturday Night Live as Wario. So you have Musk as Wario, and then Luigi tries to assassinate him with a turtle shell, and they stop him. So you still have the same thing, Luigi versus the CEO. And then if you look at the madness, which essentially foreshadowed Luigi, there was a tech billionaire representing Musk who was funding Nazis online, who was assassinated by an armed Antifa with a ghost gun. So another ghost gun reference. Luigi's ghost gun, and the assassin in the madness's ghost gun. And each of these are overlapping. These are also coded with the color green, the Green Beret, Luigi in green. And when I was watching the trailer to the movie Mickey 17, my first thought was Robert Pattinson in the hoodie, in the raincoat, looked like Luigi. Because our first image of him, he was smiling at the camera. I think he was in a Starbucks. And I thought, that's interesting. It looks like Luigi. I have to watch it. And it turns out Mark Ruffalo plays a Trump character. And the Luigi character shoots him, but the bullet just grazes his cheek. And he poses for the camera. Of course, even though that's exactly what happened in Butler, it's not possible. It's just a coincidence because the movie was filmed a couple of years before. Or at least that's the normie view. The informed view is that messaging was actually deliberately planted there and in a lot of other places. Yeah, Elon being Wario was pretty funny. Duet says, the birther movement may be a distraction for the fact we don't know who our politicians really are. Well, the obsession with Obama's birthday is kind of interesting. And Jurassic Liars has expounded on this endlessly, but August 4th, which is also the birthday of Hakeem Jeffries, who's kind of an Obama imitator. Similar historic role. I think he's like the first speaker, black speaker of the House. There's this August 4th connection, though, that's intriguing in a lot of these things. The number 84 and August 4th has been a consistently repeated theme revolving around the foreshadowed Trump assassination attempt. And 84 days after Butler, he goes back and he's there with Elon Musk. And at 6:11, they have a minute of silence for the firemen. And then someone saying Ave Maria, which is a song sung by the Riddler in the Batman movie. And the Riddler, if you haven't seen it, looks exactly like Thomas Crooks, the shooter. But there's a lot of repetition with that particular number 84, which happens to be the 216th day of the year, which is 6 times 6 times 6, 6 cubed. And 216 is the phoenix cycle, according to Pythagoras, the idea that the soul reincarnates every 216 years. So there's you get a break, you get a vacation in between your turn at the wheel, your incarnation. What's up, PsyOp Sidecar? The big enchilada says IPS, I prophecy stuff. You know, it's funny though that we kind of are, but we're not making prophetic guesses on some appeal to a divine or mystical source. We show our sources, we show our homework. I'll show you my receipts. Because when you recognize the predictive, rather the proactive nature of history, the manufacturing of history is proactive. It's not retconning. It's not editing the past and burning books. No, they're proactively creating history by faking or simulating events on the world stage, which get accepted as real. And then these fake events become part of our consensus reality, and they're persistent. They're assumed to actually exist. And this type of reality manipulation, this timeline hijacking, has given the world government ultimate creative control over our internalized model of the world. And by examining the programming that correlates with every single staged historic event, you can see that we're prepared for it in the form of advertising, product placement, predictive programming. And we are acclimated to the stories and the characters before they actually exist on the world stage as real people, real events. So by looking at what is being directed into the minds of the masses, you can make a bit of a prediction. You can extrapolate from that. Oh, we're being inundated with nothing but bunker, fallout, nukes. We're being educated about these particular weapons. Well, that's what they're likely going to implement in some way. They educate you about the thing that they're going to terrorize you with next, or that they will introduce into the news cycles next. And this is opening the Overton window. I mentioned this yesterday, that the movie screen is the Overton window. Netflix is the Overton window. If they show it on the Netflix, it's within the realm of possibility, no matter how unlikely. And not only are we making, somewhat loose predictions about what's likely to occur, but we are making more specific predictions. Like, if this event is fake, it will have these qualities. It will have some readily implementable political agenda. It will have concurrent and predictive programming. It will likely have some conspicuous use of the number 33 for some unknown reason. Not to mention the usual array of hoax indicators, deviations from standard protocol, actors that don't know how to cry. Just, it goes on. We have a list of hoax indicators. So we don't just call everything fake, but everything that is faked fits within a predictable template. There will be a drill happening at the same time, for example. And what we have noted here is that these indicators, even just one of them, is enough, I think, to raise suspicions and doubts, and we're usually proven right. So fake events are predictable. It's actually entrained. I call it systemic fakery, but they have actually entrained entertainment with fake events. And the conspiracy theorists have been misled for years about what the predictive programming means. They've been fed a steady diet of simulation theory and other mystical explanations, so they don't arrive at the correct conclusion, which is that the government that's behind the manufacturing of history has a way of inserting its messaging into all of the popular entertainment. The books, any major event that they talk about on the news likely was already fed to the public in the form of fiction. Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela, that whole thing. Well, that was referenced in a Jack Ryan, which is Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy obviously is well known in this area because of 9/11. We're living in Tom Clancy novels, overlapping fictional universes. All right, let's see. Big Enchilada says International Owl Day is August 4th. Well, again, August 4th, Obama's birthday, is a very interesting date in relationship to Trump. So there's always been this dialectic between the two. And I think that's one of the reasons why this actor we're talking about, Esposito, is out there on the world stage denouncing Trump. Because one of the other things I pointed out, and this is pretty consistent, is that the actors in movies will in some way bring that role to the world stage. Before Joker 1 came out, which ended in a lot of mayhem and activism, the riots, the clown-faced thugs rising up behind the Joker, before that movie came out, Joaquin Phoenix was in the news for his activism. He even got arrested with Jane Fonda on Fire Drill Friday. They had a burning globe in the back, so it changed the world. But the activism there changed the world. Environmentalism, anti-capitalism is pretty much the same message as Joker. Kill the rich. The capitalist system is letting the mentally ill people fall through the cracks. The poor in that movie are represented as essentially having been clowned by the system, and the rich need to pay. Kill the rich is like literally one of the reoccurring messages on the screen throughout that movie. And that also relates to Luigi, same messaging. And the Luigi Joker overlap is highly significant. And it needs to be looked at in the context of the overlaps between Daniel Penny and Batman, and how Joker and Batman in the fictional universe, as it relates to predictive programming, relate to the left and the right. There's been a lot of Batman and Joker movie relationships between psyops, from the Boston bombing to the Aurora, Colorado shooting, which we talked about last night. And then, of course, there's some 2020 stuff. All right, let's continue. Mr. Interrupt says there's an owl god statue in the Bohemian Grove. Yeah, I still haven't really figured out how they made Moloch into an owl. I thought Moloch was a bull, and yet he's presented as an owl at the Illuminati summer camps. Like, I don't know how that works. I saw this artist in a gallery in Santa Fe that had these iron sculptures, these wrought iron sculptures, various metal animals. And I was thinking, we need to get like a very large penguin that we can, put a fire inside of and do some kind of meetups in the summer. I haven't really decided exactly where, but I think we can find a place. Kind of our own Bohemian Grove. Let's see here. Ariana Grande just came out against ICE. Again, yeah, that's another example where the actors who are playing these characters actually relate to that, in roles that relate to the real world, will go off on the world stage, and they're not in character, but they're still essentially saying the same thing. Like, I think it's notable too that the ones who play Trump tend to be the most Trump deranged. Alec Baldwin, he played Trump on Saturday Night Live for several years. Super Trump deranged, although he kind of quieted down after blasting those people on the Rust movie set. And then you had Robert De Niro, significantly Trump deranged, and he plays a Trump-esque character in Machete, who's at the podium ranting about immigrants, and he gets shot. And Mark Ruffalo, speaking at the Golden Globes, also kind of fits into this, insofar as he also just recently played a Trump character who gets shot, and his birthday is 11/22, interestingly. Just another one of these patterns we picked up on. Now, there's a little bit more to it with this Giancarlo character, especially with Megalopolis, because Megalopolis is 100% Trump. Make Rome great again. It's pretty blatant. There's another one as well. It's a Tom Wolfe novel they turned into a movie where the real estate magnate who's experiencing all kinds of scandals in his life is essentially Trump. Grangerman says the movie Disclosure Day premieres on 6/12, the day after 6/11. Okay, last 6/11, and 6/11 has a lot of code attached. It's code for something having to do with specifically the right wing. There's the death day of McVeigh. Trump was shot at 6/11. There's a lot of 6/11 stuff that we've noted that is associated with the right and domestic terrorism from the right. I always saw it as an inverted 9/11. But the thing is, last year, Trump was at the Kennedy Performing Arts Center on that day. And he was posing in front of a bust of Kennedy where his head was in front of Kennedy's head, making this association. And this year, now it's called the Trump Kennedy. He actually merged the two. And this summer, they're going to be performing Back to the Future, which is intriguing considering Biff Tannen is based on Trump. Mr. Interrupt says, I've just discovered your work. I'm wondering if there's also citizen-led staged events. Well, the citizens do get involved in major mass casualty events. What we're talking about is the use of simulated mass casualty events and other styles of events for the purposes of influencing the mass opinion, perception management, essentially PR stunts, psyops. But the difference between what we're talking about here and what the conspiracy theorists talk about when they delve into the same area is they think people really die. And what I'm pointing out is that when these events are staged, there's no real deaths. And that's a hard concept for some people to wrap their heads around, but there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't think there would be deaths. It would be like as senseless as killing people during the making of a movie. It's like, no, you simulate these things. If you kill people, you change a propaganda event into a war crime, a conspiracy. It invalidates the NDAs. It's messy. Now, if a person does it, like let's say you and a friend did some staged event, that'd be called a hoax. And the media will call what we're describing these things, they'll say that we're calling them hoaxes. No, we're not saying hoaxes. The word hoax is too limited. We're not talking about some small scale, isolated operation. We're talking about government created history where they're hijacking the news and inserting events that will dominate the news cycle that the real news will bounce off of, because it's not all news is fake. It's certain big staged events. And so there's a qualitative difference. It's mostly of scale between a government psychological operation and a hoax. So yeah, obviously there are hoaxes and scams and fraud. You think about fraud, for example. So many different ways, people can commit fraud. Well, it's really no different than what we're talking about. It's just a scale thing. Chris Johnstone, Portal Complex, and thank you, Big Hair Tsunami. Dave Hazel, They Lie We See, Uncool Band, THC, Jack, Mark Simmons, Vanden, Chris Diamond, Miss Dirty Work, and well, they've all received the titanium blue wrench. The van will come by, they'll leave it on your front porch. If it's not there, check your doorbell cam. Tim, did you ever see that clip of Tom Hanks saying there was more of a chance of dragons with red capes invading than Trump being elected? That was a clear reference. No, I haven't seen that clip, but yeah, Tom Hanks, for some reason, was really dragged deep into the Q lore. They believed he was one of the top adrenochrome vampires. Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to the claims that the celebrities were all adrenochrome vampires? Seems like the QAnon people have kind of backed off. I still see recycled Q drops circulating. And I'm like, why are you referencing some anonymous shit poster from 8 years ago as though it were predicting something completely boring 8 years later? I mean, they believe that QAnon and Trump were time travelers. Really, some people shouldn't be trusted with the internet. You spend a few nights online, and next thing you think that Donald Trump's a time traveler and he's saving the world from a satanic cabal. And they really did believe that stuff. This was such a successful psychological operation in itself. The whole MAGA movement is a big government-run psyop. TPUSA, you think that's real grassroots? No, that's all controlled. Mr. Interrupt says, totally. You got me thinking about the idea of doing the save. Yeah, we're talking about, okay, now we say large-scale media fraud, but something to consider is that what we're talking about is something that is probably legal. Like, I actually think that we should look at media as having replaced and supplanted the idea of a state church. And it supplies us with myths. It supplies us with miracles and martyrs, which are important. If you haven't seen Newsbenders, I would highly recommend Newsbenders. It's from 1968. It's posted on my blog at timosman.substack. You can find it on YouTube. Newsbenders is about this thing called the Central World News Services that infiltrates every single media organization in the world. And what they do is they insert fake events and they plan things 5 years in advance for the purposes of maintaining world peace, keeping everyone on the same sheet, reacting in predictable ways, managing the human herd, like en mass mind control, like a one world religion. But instead of having your myths from some old dusty scriptures that they read to you on Sundays, your myths are broadcast real time, and you're part of it. You're part of the process. Your reaction is part of it. You're immersed in it. It's an immersive illusion. So I think that's what we're actually looking at here. But newsbenders from 1968 again posited 5 years in advance. Our analysis of these fake events and their corresponding predictive and concurrent programming and those production schedules and how far back they go, well, we're looking at all the various examples of entertainment, movies, books, etc., that foreshadow an event, and then finding the common denominators. And based on that, you can arrive at the earliest example that contains all of the same facets or props or ideas or names, and then pretty much put that as your guess as to how far back this particular event was planned. So in the case of the assassination of Charlie Kirk event, I would argue that the script for the event, how it would go down, the names of the characters involved, including TPUSA, I would say that was all in a script, in a folder, as early as 1998, but probably sooner. I'd say 95 is a safe bet. And we can make the same kind of argument for every single fake event just based on the corresponding reinforcement content within entertainment. So what this suggests here is that the propaganda vectors that reach the masses, popular movies, directors, video games, authors, they are in connection with the intelligence agencies getting involved to some degree. Like for your next book, make it about terrorism attacking New York. For your next video game, include this. And when you get down to it, you can see how it would be really easy to have that kind of a relationship where the artists or directors wouldn't have any knowledge about what their messaging is doing other than it's part of the propagating the masses with certain ideas. They wouldn't have to know the events are fake, nor would they have to know that there's a direct correlation between the events and their propaganda, and they probably wouldn't know the events were fake. I think there's a lot of compartmentalization, and there's no reason to assume that this is common knowledge at any level. Mr. Interrupt says, isn't the immersive illusion a lot like what older theater was about? I learned there was a lot of current events and famous people involved in ancient theater. I got the term immersive illusion from an article breaking down Space Cadets, which was a 10-episode reality TV show where you had 10 wannabe astronauts go into space, low Earth orbit. Turns out they weren't in space. They never left the Earth. They were in a studio, and they're able to maintain the illusion for 10 days. And it was revealed that the way they maintained the illusion is half of the astronauts were actually actors. So there were only 5 real people who were tricked. The other 5 were actors designed or who were intended to keep the dupes, the non-actors, from communicating and figuring out what they were a part of. And they did vet the people involved who were getting onto the ship, who were joining the show, to make sure that they were uninhibited, that they weren't too versed in science or science fiction. So they selectively chose a dumbed down audience to fall for it. The show raised the issue of how an immersive illusion can convince average people over a period of time, especially when reinforced as part of a group of believers, especially authority figures. Oh, here we go. Yeah, okay, so yeah, average people being convinced because they're part of a group. This is not new or even that groundbreaking. You know, there's been a number of studies where people will lie just to be part of the group. I mean, people are I think it's just a matter of conforming for the sake of feeling secure. I think people are threatened by standing out. But it says here, these cadets were lulled into what is in effect an alternative universe. Now, the concept of fictional universe is also pertinent here when we're talking about the end result of a lot of fake events superimposed into our worldview. We're talking about a closed system of information, meaning the establishment media and the alternative media, which is just another wing of the establishment. They control all of the narratives within these two categories, but they don't talk about within the mainstream news or alternative, they don't talk about fake stuff. Everything's assumed to be real within. If it contradicts that, like the idea that Charlie Kirk didn't really die, it doesn't get included. They exist in a fictional universe with agreed upon lies. And a fictional universe only publishes its own brand of characters or only acknowledges its own mythos, sort of like a Disneyland. You're not going to find Warner Brothers characters there. It's a closed set. You're not going to mix Marvel Comics with Star Wars characters. They're not compatible. And so there's a compatibility between mainstream and alternative because they're two takes on the same fake events. But it's a duopoly. The perspective that includes media fakery doesn't get platformed to any significant degree. So the media consumers, mainstream or alternative, in effect, do live in a fictional universe. They do have an agreed upon set of myths, martyrs, lies they agree upon. So when I call this a religion, I'm talking about it does in fact have all the architecture of a religion. It does have its God constructs. It has its superstitions. It has its miracles and its myths. 5-star says, who gives the intelligence agencies the motivations, ideas to create or direct the scripts, or is it them at the top? That's a good question, actually. I don't have all the answers on that. I mean, obviously, we don't know specifically, but what we can somewhat ascertain here is that there's one government. I mean, there's no attempts by any government to undermine other governments' media by saying, oh, these events are all fake. No, there's a consensus. There is a global consensus that has been manufactured. And I think this is how government actually works. In my handbook for the recently deprogrammed, I made a reference to this Latin phrase inspired by Tacitus called instrumentum regni. And this is what this Greek historian Polybius said about this concept, because that means the instrument of monarchy. And it's talking about ruling through fear, through myths. He says, I believe superstition, which maintains the cohesion of the Roman state. My opinion is that they've adopted this course for the sake of the common people. It would not be necessary if it were possible to form a state composed of wise men. But the multitude is fickle, full of lawless desires, unreasoned passion, and violent anger. The multitude must be held in check by invisible terrors and pageantry. So what he's saying here is that they've introduced among the people notions concerning the gods and beliefs in the terrors of hell, and that moderns are rash for banishing these beliefs. So Polybius was discussing how superstition and myths and the fear of God or God constructs is used to control the masses. And I think this is actually how government runs its mass mind control. It's predicated upon getting the masses to respond to universal threats. Climate change is a big one. The pandemic brought about another one, where everyone reacts in uniform to a perceived threat to the collective safety. And I would even suggest that climate change and ocean levels rising is actually just a repackaging of Noah's flood, where the masses will self-police one another if they all believe that wickedness will draw or incur the wrath of God and bring in floodwaters. So it's a way of getting the masses to be afraid of this God construct, but instead of God, it's Gaia. If we don't change our ways and stop over-consuming fossil fuels, if we don't do something about all the trash and the waste, Gaia is going to punish us. And this puts the left or the anti-capitalists in a position of heavily criticizing the political and economic systems that are apparently destroying the world and about to incur the wrath of Gaia that will disproportionately affect the poor, but will kill us all. Well, I would say, again, that's a myth. And I think these myths are very useful for regulating the masses. And look how successful it actually is. There are so many examples of it. As far as who writes the scripts, so that's a very good question, because we can actually give you names. I can list, and I call them metascriptors. I can list the directors who are associated with the major psyops, 1 degree separated because it's in their content, or even possibly directly. We can pretty much make reasonable guesses here. And like I said, we show our receipts, but 9/11 has Stanley Kubrick all over it. The earliest predictive programming for that is in his 1968 2001 A Space Odyssey. It's also in Full Metal Jacket. It's in The Shining, but the people obsessed with the Apollo 11 stuff never noticed it. It's in James Cameron's work, T2. It's also in Titanic. It's in the works of many other directors and writers. And so what I'm saying is we can find the writers and artists who are recruited to help manufacture these historic events. And it does involve an interlocking, network of government, media, of course, the law enforcement and hospitals and the EMTs. If you look at the Department of Homeland Security and everyone who'd have to be involved to pull these things off, it's actually very widespread. If you look at 9/11's Wikipedia page, you can find a list of drills that were being conducted that day that had to do with terrorism. And if you look at the number of drills conducted on 9/11 for a terror attack, you can easily understand how that entire area was functionally a closed movie set for the duration of that day. But what we can prove here is that the concurrent programming, which is highly specific, and we have many examples, that alone reveals that what you're seeing in the news was scheduled as though it were a Netflix show, like quite literally scheduled. Like, oh, that news event, that person getting shot or whatever it is, that crash, that was actually scheduled months ago, years ago, who knows, depending on the event. And one of the greatest examples of this has been the Charlie Kirk thing. And we did a deep dive into all the various examples of predictive content that led up to it, and the real-time released content and the concerted messaging behind it. And I'm confident in saying that the entire script for TPUSA and its leader being martyred, the marriage with the Miss America, Miss Arizona, and the children, and the relationship with the conspiracy theorist to be Candace Owens, that whole thing was easily handed to them in a script form when they were still 18, 19, before they even got into their roles. And this suggests that, yes, Candace Owens is essentially a soap opera actress, a reality TV show star. She's not a conspiracy theorist trying to dig up facts to find the truth. No, the rabbit trails she's leading you down were paved by the CIA probably 50 years ago. There's nothing new in her content because all of its conclusions are based upon this idea that there's a second shooter and ultimately leads to Israel. That's always been the bottom line. I said this on the day it happened. But as far as this idea of things being planned in advance, 5 years is a big deal. Any foreshadow, any pre-planning is obviously a big deal. But when we're talking about decades, that should fundamentally alter the landscape here. Because if these are scheduled 10 years in advance, 20 years in advance, well, then what does it say about anything that we're told to believe is organic and real? Because we're not just talking about fake events and mass casualty events. We're talking about people. Donald Trump, in his present form, pre-existed himself. in entertainment. Like he already existed in the public imagination, and then he just jumped into that role, you know, around 2008 or 2009. But he wasn't in that capacity. He wasn't that version of Trump yet. And many of the predictive programming roles for Trump foreshadowed who he would be. Like 1958 Trackdown, the Trump goes into a town, gets them to build a wall. He's going to protect them from a cosmic threat. He's driven out of town. He's arrested. Well, even CNN was noticing this movie from 58 years ago, this TV show, had some eerie parallels with Trump. And even then, in 2016, it hadn't all come true yet, including the arrest. They could have said, well, if there's anything to this, if this is some kind of foreshadowing, then we should expect Donald Trump to get arrested. You should have been able to have guessed that in 2016, just based on the content of the film. So also it's important to consider that we're talking about the primary role of government is mind control, and the media, you know, it's for all intents and purposes, it's under a monolithic influence. So you might have different media organizations, and it's very internally diverse. A lot of it's independent. They're not all lockstep, but they don't have to be, because the big stories get the big focus are the ones that draw the attention, and everything else reacts to it. But media is a wing of government, and it's not just like mainstream. Mainstream and alternative are part of the same program. There's no meaningful distinction between mainstream and alternative. Alternative will pose, it will posture as anti-establishment, but they are establishment. And they're establishment because what they do is they gatekeep any minds that see through the mainstream. It's like, oh, come over here, mainstream's liars. And that tricks a lot of people, because they think, well, if these guys are liars, these guys must be truthers. No, it's lies and alt lies. It's programming and alternative programming. And by programming, it's perspectives that reinforce the secondary timeline of fake events as though these things were real. There are no news outlets, agencies, or platforms that do not operate from that premise, that do not adhere to the program, the pre-scripted, the pre-scheduled fake events, and their essential reality into perpetuity. The only ones who are looking at the world stage critically, who are including in our perspective all of the fake stuff, are outside of their duopoly, is what I've been calling it. But this thing pre-exists. I think this whole the reason I brought up the Greek historian is that what we're living in, this simulation, this hyper reality, this merging of real and fake, this is a form of government that is just not new. It's total time control. So the good news is the new world order isn't coming, because it's already here. You're already in the matrix. The bad news is it's incontestable. You can't fight it. You can't stop it. I mean, imagine trying to stop it. They'd be like, oh, I'm going to go stop Islam. I'm going to stop Christianity. No, you're not going to stop a religion. You're not going to stop the dominant religion of the world. And the dominant religion of the world is not it's not an Abrahamic faith. It's not Christianity. The dominant world religion is mainstream mediation. And alternative media exists as a subset. It's not outside of the system. All right, let me roll through my Twitter feed. Again, Giancarlo Esposito says it's time for a revolution. It's highly significant that he is the mayor in Megalopolis who orchestrates the assassination attempt of the Caesar Catalina, the tyrant. Highly significant. This Trump-Obama code inserted into this movie. I may have to watch it again. Now that I think about it, it's probably even more timely. But one of the interesting aspects of Megalopolis is you have this group of individuals called the Design Authority, and they can freeze time. And the movie begins, and they're detonating something in downtown Manhattan. Looks 9/11-y. But they've got these black rim hats. They're dressed in black. They control time, the design authority. And I compared these to the strangers in Dark City. And I actually think that's where Coppola borrowed it from. Because there are elements of Dark City and the Matrix that are put into that movie Megalopolis. So it actually makes perfect sense. So the strangers or the design authority, those who control time, actually exist. And this is the mysterious group that we're speaking of, the metascriptors. The ones who implement the script, who do control time because they manufacture history. Mr. Interrupts says, I feel like they argue amongst themselves like factions. I doubt it. I'm saying it's uniform. Like, I don't think there's any, this thing's not being steered. Like, for example, it's not a matter of voting to determine what they're going to do in response to how we're going to believe it or not. I think they have already just decided all this stuff is going to be rolled out in this way. And if the public thinks it looks fake or half the public calls it lies, it doesn't matter because we don't have a platform for that. There's only two platforms, mainstream and controlled opposition alternative. There is no platform for those who are cognizant of the fact that we live in a closed informational system, an internalized Truman Show. You know, I talked about the Truman Show being a Gnostic allegory and how Ed Harris plays Christoph, the guy in the moon who controls the stage and controls Truman, and how he also plays an analogous role in Westworld as the man in black with the black rimmed hat, with the knife, very Saturnian. Reaper, Saturn controls time, the cycles of time, and how in Westworld he's part of this thing where they keep the synths from waking up because they get killed every day, and then they start over with amnesia, not aware of what happened the day before, and they just repeat the cycle endlessly. And until they break that cycle and recognize a continuity, they are prisoners. They figure that out and they get out of that closed system. Sort of like Truman. He starts noticing patterns. He starts noticing glitches in the matrix, so to speak. And in the matrix, you've got, similar concepts here. But my point here is that I was talking about how Ed Harris plays this demiurge. Even a Snowpiercer was brought up, another closed system where they're going in a train that never stops. He's the engineer. So this actor consistently plays the role of the architect. That's what demiurge means, the architect of the creation. And so he's the architect of the Truman Show. But this idea is that we see the same myths being conveyed in all these various movies, and they all point to control over time. And the news cycle is what people have to break out of. You can't look at every day as, well, maybe the news is telling the truth today. No, it's the same entity that lied last month, last year, 10 years before. It's been lying to you your entire life. It's not suddenly going to become honest. And you have to maintain that continuity of its inherent dishonesty. But after I talked about the Gnostic allegory, suddenly, and I've been getting these in my feed, I've seen 5 or 6 different channels release videos about the Truman Show, which is like, 27 years old? And about how it's an allegory for the demiurge. I'm like, that's intriguing. But I go deeper than just the movie, though, because you'll note that in the movies that contain these heavy esoteric messages, the actors will convey those same messages throughout multiple movies. I call it archetype casting. It's like typecasting. This guy's a thug. This guy's a fool. They have these various types that you can play very easily. But I say archetype casting because there's some who are chosen for a role that isn't explicit, but it connects all these movies. And I don't know if it's significant, but he plays Kane in Top Gun 2 Maverick. And Maverick is 100% encoded with sun god symbolism. Look at all the characters' names, like Phoenix, which was a Christ name. Rooster references Christ. Hangman, played by, was it Glenn? Brand, what's the guy's name? The guy he was 33 at the time. I think it's Glenn Reynolds. I got to double check. Oh, Glenn Powell or something. Yeah, Glenn Powell. But anyway, we were talking about all these various sun god aspects in the Top Gun movie, and Maverick is opposed by Ed Harris's character. And I thought, okay, there might be something in this kind of dialectic between the darkness that controls the world and the ones who are breaking out of the system, transcending the matrix. But we have been mapping these things out for some time. So that's why I brought up this idea of concerted messaging. Like, what was up with all the references to Nick, Nike, Nicholas? And it's pretty blatant. You know, when you see these events, this is okay. So one of the hoax indicators is something in the event connects it to previous events. So when we see Alex Preddy go down and you see that name right behind him, I'm like, okay, that's kind of consistent with what we'd expect of a fake event. One of the things that made me do a double take on the Renee Good thing was wicked for good. And I more or less predicted if for good contains predictive programming for Renee Good, it's going to be pretty obvious in the movie. There's going to be some uses of the word good that correlate to Renee, and there's going to be themes. Well, sure enough, Wicked Part 2 is basically anti-ICE protests. That's the Wicked Witch as Antifa protesting ICE and the deportations of the talking animals. And there's a constant use of the word good, meaning that to be good, you have to sacrifice your privilege for the lower class. So it makes perfect sense that Renee Good and Alex Preddy would both be individuals who you could characterize from the leftist perspective as having privilege and having set aside their privilege to struggle for the ones that the Wizard of Oz is deporting. And Trump is obviously the Wizard of Oz in the story. Now, there's another element too that I think is worth getting into, which is that the Emerald City gets the EMP at the end of part 1. And the Emerald City is code for Seattle. So I got Emerald City, and then Greenland has been brought up a lot. And the movie Greenland 2, and Greenland 2 is about a comet hitting the Earth. It also contains bunkers and the like. And then Green Day opening up for the Super Bowl, and they have this nuke on their album cover. So I've been looking at these overlapping themes here with green, like the Green Witch, Antifa, and trying to determine, you know, what exactly is being conveyed here. And I'm not making a prediction as far as like some psyop happening at the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is not the end of the world. It's always looked at by truthers on X as some kind of ground zero event about to happen. But if you look at past precedent, you don't really see psyops happening in full view of the public in an open movie set. Like, these aren't open sets. And I don't think they risk stampeding that many people or destroying that particular platform. Like, I don't think they really want people involved that closely. It doesn't mean there's not going to be something, but this is what I'm saying here, is that there's messaging that we are picking up on that kind of is suggestive. So when I watched the Wicked Part 2, they consistently use the word good in the way that it has been used since, like the Be Good pin. Not insignificant that Mark Ruffalo is wearing a Be Good pin at the Golden Globes. And he's, again, stepping down from his privileged position to focus on the struggle, and he's being good, which, again, the theme of the movie, For Good, the song, contains the lyrics about how the Wicked Witch is limited because she's, of course, poor and an outsider, but Ariana Grande is unlimited because of her influence. She can influence the wizard or even get rid of him. So that's why it's notable that Ariana Grande right now is advocating for resistance to ICE. She's being good. That movie came out last November, and it pretty much told the story that we just lived through this January. All right, let's see what else we have here. Yesterday, we talked a bit about the Seahawks versus the Patriots. and how the Patriot logo is weirdly called the Flying Elvis. And someone noticed, and this was years ago, but I found this on Reddit. They noticed that if you look at the Baphomet, the goat-headed thing, and you turn it sideways, well, the horns are now both in your view, but you got to profile the face. Well, that's what the Flying Elvis Patriots logo looks like. So it's admittedly looking like Elvis, but someone else has pointed out that, yeah, it kind of has horns and a goatee and a star on the forehead. It's kind of got that Baphomet thing to it. And this was correlated with the Levi Stadium, because A Life is Levi made the Baphomet in 1856. It's got Levi, and then Elvis, again, Levi's Stadium, Elvis, anagrams, which are really big in witchcraft. I mean, anagrams, sigils, reversing the spelling of things. It's all part of spellcraft. But anyway, there is a correlation there already. And then you throw into it that A Life is Levi's birthday is February the 8th, which is the day of the Super Bowl. So what does that all mean? I don't know. I mean, I don't exactly have an answer other than it's a noteworthy pattern, especially when it comes to birth dates. Like, okay, so we brought up Elvis, right? And Seattle Seahawks and Levi Stadium and all this. Well, the Wicked Witch has Elvis's birthday, and her character gives the EMP to Seattle, the Emerald City. So again, another element here is the green witch and the EMP. So there's a lot of buildup for this idea, I think, of a leftist strike, a leftist attack. Although I've always thought the Seattle thing would come from the right. There's some kind of MAGA thing, or the base, which is a white nationalist group, and Al-Qaeda means the base. But to the point where it might be both. You see, on 4/19, 2023, was it, when Trump was in court and they had the Maxwell Azrello set himself on fire outside the courthouse? Well, that's the anniversary of the date that Dave Koresh was incinerated. That was 2024. Interestingly enough, he was 37. We've been talking about these 37-year-old martyrs, like the Green Beret, Green Beret. I'm going to use Candace Owens' pronunciation. She's being roasted right now. The Green Beret was 37, the guy who set himself on fire outside the Trump Hotel. This guy, Maxwell Azrello, 37, doused himself in liquid before throwing conspiracy theory pamphlets in the air. And again, this was the guy outside the Trump trial in Manhattan. And then you had Renee, 37, Alex Pretty, 37. What is with that? Not sure. But the thing is, he wasn't left or right. And the anniversary of Waco, the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, that's all significant to Trump being on trial that date, because he actually kicked off his campaign in Waco, which is ground zero for this Timothy McVeigh and his mission. That's what radicalized him. And that's where Alex Jones got his start, with the whole gun grab paranoia stuff. But anyway, this guy released a documentary, and he was photographed Newt Gingrich wearing a shirt that said, "Eat the rich." So kill the rich, eat the rich. And he had this sign that said, "Trump is with Biden and they're about to fascist coup us." So his messaging here was simply that Trump and Clinton are on the same side. I read his manifesto. He even talked about history bending, which is weird because I coined that phrase. Maxwell Azrello self-immolates at court where the Trump faces trial for bribery. But again, I'm bringing him up because of the fact that he was not really easy to pin on the left or the right, and yet his symbolic act took place outside the Trump courthouse on 4/19. And yesterday I did bring up that, and this ties into Seattle, that the Space Needle was designated a historic monument on 4/19. So the date is also intriguing there. I mean, what's up with that? Setting oneself on fire to promote a manifesto. Like, nobody reads today. Like, do people, maybe, I mean, really, And one of the things about the way that he supposedly burned is that he didn't scream. It was very quiet. And CNN was down the way commenting on the scent, and he was next to like a hot dog stand. So there was some kind of strange, almost surreal nature to the way it was reported. But there's this thing called Zell gel, the naked burn gel. So if you look at Game of Thrones, for example, when you see characters who are set on fire, they at the time, so that they can't really match real flame to make it convincing using CGI at the time. Probably now they could, but what they use is something called Zell gel. It's a naked burn gel. And so what they do is they cover themselves in the stuff and it burns and it doesn't burn the skin. The only thing is you have to hold your breath. And so I thought, well, that would explain why he's not screaming. And it would explain quite a lot, I think, about the whole scene. Like, again, staged, fake. Same thing with the 33-year-old who set himself on fire at the Ellipse with the 113 on his shirt that TMZ was conveniently there to record. That was 100% Zell gel, naked burn gel. Now, okay, there's this story that came out about Alex Preddy that kind of contradicts the idea of him being a gentle nurse. And I told you I was in a class and someone in the back said, my mom's best friend's father was being taken care of by Alex Preddy and said he was a very gentle soul. And everybody in the class, they all bawl. What are you talking about? You got to be making this up. But you can't. What am I going to say? You're lying. Prove it. That people attach themselves to fake events. But anyway, there are people who are looking at this video where Alex Preddy is violently attacking a ICE vehicle, and he breaks the tail light, and he's raging. So there's people saying, well, this has got to be AI. This can't be real. Like, okay. Yeah, anything you don't believe is real is AI. You could just make that claim. Alex Petty armed, spitting on federal agents, kicking out a taillight 1 week before the incident that claimed his life. Everything about it looks like an agitator, like a trained agitator. I don't know who Aiden Ross is, but Aiden Ross accidentally leaked from his higher-up connections that another quarantine is currently on the way. He's a kick streamer. So I don't know what makes him authoritative, but he's got a big reach, and he claims to be in the know about some upcoming quarantine. I don't know, possibly. I mean, I think it's in the cards. It's on the script, but I don't think it's going to be viral. I think it's going to be fallout. So it's not going to be the same thing, but the procedures are pretty much analogous. New footage exposes Erica family ties to Tyler Robinson. They knew him. There's so much drama about Erica Kirk. And then there's just a bad look that this movie comes out where she's on the roof with a sniper rifle. Donald Trump, talking about Alex Preddy, said he feels worse about Renee Good because her parents are Trump fans. All right, I think we covered most of what I wanted to get into. Today's the anniversary of the Challenger explosion. And in the news right now is Challenger 650 that crashed, killing 7 on board. And it's been reported that it's eerie because they said, "Let there be light," referring to runway 33. All traffic is stopped in the field. Let there be light. So make of that what you will. I think it's kind of conspicuous. And then I look at the picture of the attorneys involved in this, and they've got this big AI on the wall behind them. Like, what are they telling us here? Did we talk about the bruise on Trump's hand shaped like Greenland? Sometimes I feel like there's some trollishness. And there's a lot of internet tough guys on both sides. patriots and Antifa. So you pretty much have that strong dialectic, and it's been activated. And they're all making videos threatening one another. So there's no sense in imagining that this thing de-escalates. The weather's just going to get better. And I saw a trailer for a movie called Shelter. And again, this stands out because there has been a recurring theme since Fallout came out of Fallout shelters. It's just been repetition. And so again, looking at what is being promulgated to the masses as an indicator of what's to come. This was posted by IFEPE73. Deadly bomb cyclone headed for New York City. Could batter the Northeast with more snow. A bomb cyclone or a bombogenesis. Okay, so now I got to add that to the list of climate chaos events that are kind of new, possibly exaggerated takes on normal things like fire nados. Now we've got bombogenesis, bomb cyclones. I'm waiting for the nuclear radioactive tsunamis. Intense weather storms that form over the ocean and rapidly build up deadly power. I'm not saying that there's not really snow, but it's a clever way to describe it. Bomb cyclone, bombogenesis. Because you hear these things, and the implication is these are new, these are novel effects, and these are the result of you and your gas guzzler and your political economic system. Jason Statham, new movie comes out Friday called Shelter, January 30th. Just a heads up. The nuke scene from T2 is one of the most scientifically accurate nuclear detonation scenes in any media. Scientists wrote letters of praise to the film crew for accuracy. Fascinating. Again, talking about metascriptors, James Cameron is a big name in movies that create content that help set the masses up for whatever psyop is incoming. All right, scrolling through my Discord server, if you go to ips.monster, you can follow the Discord server there. It's quite a lot of research happening. I put out a blog about the significance of the name Nick, Nicholas, Nicole, and Nike, Victory. Again, what I'm terming concerted messaging, which is a recurring theme, a tactic, where, like the name Charlie, we talked about this when Charlie Kirk was squibbed, how suddenly on the same day you had the comeback from Charlie Sheen to go with Charlie Kirk's America Comeback Tour, where suddenly Charlie Sheen's on all the magazine and the headlines seem ambiguously written in such a way that they could reference either Charlie. And then he's on Joe Rogan, the #1 podcast, talking about getting sniped, talking about Oswald. Or the concerted messaging related to JFK around the time, where his last message to Roger Stone was, hey, come on my show, let's talk about JFK. Again, concerted messaging is like a form of concurrent programming, but instead of coming from Netflix or the movies, it's mostly going through smaller propaganda vectors or podcasts, certain influencers, but nonetheless, it does build up an echo chamber to where if you were to search that name, it would bring up a lot of sources with overlapping messaging. It's an inescapable echo chamber that they have put us within. All right, I'll put a link to my blog if you want to follow. I'll be posting more there. I would recommend looking at PSYOP programming in sports and Wicked for Renee Good, which, I will watch bad movies. I'll watch movies strictly to evaluate the propaganda messaging. But I think if you look at that particular blog post, I'll put a link, you'll agree with me that this movie was synchronized with the Minneapolis events, that it was timed, and that the target audience, who are meant to be sympathetic towards the activists are the ones who are targeted with wicked too, to have the anti-Trump slant, to believe in sacrificing their status or their system to save the lower class. This Marxist class warfare underpinning. And then there's something that I thought was not even necessary to the plot, but worth noting here. The Wizard of Oz says, we got a whole lot of people who believe a lot of things that aren't true. You know what we call it? History. And then he says, the truth is not a thing of fact or reason. The truth is just what everyone agrees on. Like Napoleon, lies agreed upon, but he was describing how the munchkins, the people who live in Oz, are impervious to the truth, that you could tell them the truth and they wouldn't get it. It's not their priority. They're brainwashed by the propaganda, in other words. Okay, let's see. We have been on here for about an hour and a half. I got to do some reading for my writing class, some grammar work. You know, I read somewhere, I saw some video about spelling and how our language is some sort of magical script, that we have been given a language designed to keep us trapped in the matrix, so to speak. And someone in one of these videos had said that the word grammar, here is the term grammar, comes from grimoire. So grammar, a book of, same word, book of magic. Spell, spelling a word, casting a spell, all very interesting to think about if you believe that thoughts are things and that the words that we use are more than just sounds to convey meaning to one another, but that might actually be part of the meaning creation that precedes the materialization of light into matter. That if we are indeed co-creators, then the words that we say and the thoughts that we think are factors to be considered. So of course, if we were in fact co-creators, we would be given an operating system that would hamstring us or limit us to a large degree. Ribo Nation says, in PTA's film One Battle After Another, the Christmas Adventure Club is a satirical white supremacist cabal that serves as the antagonist group. Members of this elitist fascist organization greet one another with the phrase, "Hail Saint Nick." I'm going to go ahead and screen cap that comment. Again, Nicki Minaj. There's got to be more out there that we haven't picked up on, but there's definitely a pattern here. And this pattern, as I'll mind map it out, but this pattern has this notion of victory of the people, like an insurrection thing. And that's why I put Victory of the Hive in the title of this live stream tonight. I'm going to update the archives. Yesterday we did the movie screen is the Overton Window. Tonight it was Victory of the Hive. This concept of concerted messaging is part of the body of content that reinforce the psyop reinforcement. But it shows how immersive is the word that I use. They create an echo chamber where you can say, well, I don't watch the news. It doesn't matter. You watch Netflix. I don't watch Netflix. Well, you're going to get it from somewhere. I'd even suggested that had I gone completely cold turkey, cut media out of my life, I would still be in the know. Because every class that I go to, the conversation gets into the current thing. We're going to be talking about Alex Preddy. We're going to be talking about Renee Good. It's a guarantee. Mainstream psyops are even going to be discussed in every single classroom. And that's because the mind virus carriers can't help themselves. They have it in their head, and they got to spread it. As though they know it. It's like this kind of reminds me of that movie Hot Skulls in a way. the contagious mind viruses that if you want to avoid them, you got to wear the earplugs. So earplugs are mandatory because of all these dangerous spoken mind viruses you catch through hearing them. But yeah, Hail Saint Nick, very interesting. Well, anyway, if you have any additional examples, comment on my Substack, and I'm going to update that blog post tonight with the additional nicks and references to that. All right, well, have a good night. We'll continue this conversation in the Discord. Go to ips.monster for the relevant links. I will post a link in the chat. Thank you, chat. And thanks to the supporters of the channel. And welcome to all the new Blue Wrench Lodge members. You will get notifications for members-only content as I upload it. And I am working on additional mind maps, and I'm testing out various whiteboard approaches to infographics. And those go pretty much direct to members.